gremlins! This week my plan was to make a simpler video. I decided to generate some random aesthetics, type those aesthetics into Pinterest, and choose 2 images to turn into characters. The first aesthetic I liked was Jamcore, the second was Vampire Hoe. From these, I found a photograph of a basket of strawberries and jam in a daisy meadow, and a photograph of a girl silhouetted against neon bat wings, a very dark image with just one spot of brightness. Off camera, I came up with some ideas for these images, and I decided I'd make 2 characters who are girlfriends. One is a cute cottagecore elf, and one is a punk demon/tiefling with red bat wings. I started my drawing with several sketches of pose ideas. Usually when I draw characters based on images, aesthetics, or really anything at all, I make separate images for each character in a video. However, this week I decided I wanted the 2 to be interacting. I came up with a few pose ideas, including sitting in a field of flowers, dancing together, and having the cottagecore girl tucking a flower into her demon girlfriend's hair. I really liked both these last 2 ideas, so instead of choosing between them, I decided to draw both. Remember how I said this was supposed to be a simple video? A video to give myself a break after 2 high-energy projects in a row? A video that I'm trying to finish in half the time I normally give myself because life is really busy right now? And now the video has very quickly expanded into drawing 2 images of 2 detailed characters in each image and dynamic poses. At least I'm not planning on drawing backgrounds. I was working on both images simultaneously, doing both sketches, then both line arts, then coloring both, etc., going back and forth the whole time. However, for the video, I'll show the entire process of one image together, then move on to the next one. I'm starting with the drawing of the couple dancing. I need to give these characters names, so I don't have to spend the whole video calling them the cottagecore one and the punk one. Names are the part of character creation that I am the worst at, and if you have better names, please let me know in the comments. But between some baby name websites and fantasy name generator, I've come up with the name Rosie for the cottagecore girl and Lenore for the punk girl. In this pose, Lenore has her back to the viewer, one arm around Rosie's waist and the other spread out for balance as they spin around each other. In this partnership, Lenore is definitely the more mask-presenting girlfriend, in a waistcoat and baggy jeans covered in punk patches and hardware, while Rosie has a dress with a full-volume skirt flaring out as she spins. I have a lot more detail to work with in the image I'm basing Rosie's design off, between the basket, the strawberries, the jam jar, and the flowery grass in the background. Lenore's image is so dark that all you can really see are the red wings and a little bit of the woman standing in front of them. There are a few shades of dark red and purple in the blackness, but no detail to inspire elements of Lenore's design. When I finished the sketch, I spent a while moving elements around a bit to add more dynamic, as well as flipping the canvas back and forth to check proportions. I then moved on to the sketch of the other pose of these characters, which you'll see in the second half of the video, and returned to the dancing pose to start the line art. I worked on Lenore first. Because of the lack of detail present in the vampire image, Lenore's design is a lot more up to my imagination. The one detail from the image that I'm keeping is the wings, which are sprouting out of Lenore's back. Her waistcoat is tailored to allow her wings freedom, with holes cut in the back. As well as the wings, Lenore also has horns on her head, which you can just see through her shaggy hair from this angle. The statement piece of Lenore's outfit is her pants. They're baggy cargo pants with at least 8 pockets, 6 of which are visible from this angle. I added a belt chain, a loop of studded leather, and a ring to the back to which other hardware could be clipped. There are also a bunch of patches on the pants and pockets, attached with white thread as a pop of brightness. I didn't end up adding designs to the patches, but she probably would have painted band logos, slogans, and cool drawings on them. I just wanted to save myself a bit of time. All her jewelry and the stitches on her pants are currently outlined in red, but when I start coloring, I'll change those outline colors to match their purpose. Rosie looks like the exact opposite of Lenore, which is part of the reason I ship these 2. I love dynamics like this, where people look completely opposite and yet are perfect for each other, and it's why as soon as I picked my images, I knew I wanted these characters to be lovers. Rosie has chunky strawberry-shaped earrings, and her hair is wavy and full of daisies. I styled her hair into space buns. I think it's such a cute hairstyle that my own hair is too thin, and for the moment far too short, to ever pull off. Instead, I've given this hairstyle to quite a few of my drawings. The most time-consuming part of Rosie's design to draw was her dress. The silhouette is simple, a pinafore-style dress over a puff-sleeved blouse, with a circle skirt and thin waistband. However, the dress has a gingham pattern which I drew by hand, to match the gingham pattern of the jam jar's lid. This is a lot of lines to draw, and coloring it later will take even longer. And I drew this twice! Like I always do when creating characters based on images, all the colors involved are color-picked from my reference photos, occasionally just lightened or darkened when needed. This proved very limited with Lenore's design. I'm working with white, several shades of red, black, and very dark purple. I changed the shades of several parts of her outfit as I worked, to differentiate all the colors next to each other. I did cheat slightly with her jewelry, making it silver despite no silver or grey being present in my reference image, but since both black and white are included, I felt silver was acceptable. Lenore's pants are basically black, technically very dark red, and the patches are a mix of red and purple with white stitches. Her Converse-style shoes are black and white, and her hair is very dark red. Later I'll add a black dip-dyed effect to her hair. I also decided that since Lenore is a demon, she doesn't need human-colored skin, and I made her skin purple. This is a lighter shade of purple than appears in the image, but that's fine. Finally, I colored her wing membrane red, and made them slightly transparent. I have a lot more color to work with Rosie, which is a nice change. I started by coloring the daisies in her hair, color picking straight from the daisies in my reference image. I then started working on her jewelry, the strawberries in her ears and the green beaded bracelet around her wrist. I thought her hair would be brown, the color of the basket, but when color picking from the basket, it turns out that the shades involved are much closer to a deep auburn red. Just like in the line art, the coloring of her dress took the longest out of any one element of her design. I started by just filling in the whole dress, temporarily using dark pink but turning it white when it was all colored. I often color in a darker color, then turn it white, because my background is white, so when coloring with a pale color, it's really hard to see where I've filled in, and if I've gone over the lines at all. The gingham lines of her dress were drawn on 2 different layers, each layer set to a lower opacity, so where they overlap ends up darker, like actual woven fabric does. I started with the vertical lines, trying to make sure all the lines lined up throughout the whole design. I realize now that the pattern wouldn't work like this on a circle skirt, the lines wouldn't be perfectly vertical the whole way round, but shh, it's fine. When coloring the horizontal lines, there were a few times where the outlines weren't quite correct, and I had to add an extra line to make the colors match up across the folds of the skirt. After all that red and pink in Rosie's design, I added some contrast by using the green of the strawberry leaves for her shoes and waistband. Pink and green look really good together. They're opposites on the color wheel, so it makes sense, and when I used to wear the color pink as a kid, before committing to only green forever, I'd match pink and green pretty often. Rosie actually gets to have a human skin tone, since several of the highlights on the basket are a light peachy color. I finished her design by giving her green eyes like the grass in the photo, and then I started making myself a color reference palette for each character. I color picked every color in Lenore's and Rosie's designs, grouped by category, so that when I draw these two together a second time, all the colors would be the same. I started the shading next, shading the skin first. My method to shade skin involves 2 or 3 shadow colors, each one slightly darker and more cool-toned, and 1 highlight color that's slightly lighter and warmer than the base skin tone. I draw in each section of shadow, making the neck, ears, and right where the fabric meets the skin the darkest, and adding highlights to the nose and cheeks. I then blend all the colors until the shading looks smooth and the body looks round and 3D. For shading hair, I add soft shadows and harder highlights to make the hair shiny, with a bit of more defined shadows around certain sections of hair to add definition. After shading the skin and hair, I did some more color picking of the shadow and highlight colors so that my shading in the second pose can match my shading of the first. Since I was still trying, not really, to make this a quicker drawing, it wasn't, I decided to use a simpler method of shading for the rest of the characters' designs. Normally, I add a multiply layer over each character in the scene, set it to a muted blue or purple, and using a masking layer, draw in the shadows in several intensities, then blending all the shadows to look like smooth gradients. However, today, I decided that there will be only 1 intensity of shadow, and that the edges of the shadow will be sharp and unblended. Essentially, I was using cell shading. This saves me a lot of time making the shadows look more stylized, and I think it actually looked quite good. Maybe I should alternate between shading styles more often. I really like the more cartoony look it gives these characters. My final method of attempting to save time after making this project probably twice as long as I planned it to be was to skip making a background. I love drawing backgrounds, but often they end up so detailed that they take longer to draw than my characters do. So instead, I just made the canvas a neutral beige color, and added some circular shadows under the characters to ground them in space. And here's the final look! Now, to do that all again, but in a slightly different pose. I didn't use a reference for this pose, it's a much simpler pose, and the one element that proved difficult was Rosie's hand reaching up to Lenore's face. The 2 lovers are standing next to each other, Rosie slightly in front. Rosie has a basket of strawberries over her arm, and her other hand is reaching up to stick a daisy in Lenore's hair. Lenore has one hand on the small of Rosie's back, and the other hand is in her pants pocket. She's leaning over slightly so that Rosie can reach her hair, and the pair are looking into each other's faces. This is the first look we get at Lenore's face, and you can more easily see her shaggy haircut framing her horns, as well as her sharp canine tooth. I was trying to avoid constantly switching between this image and my previous image, which at the time was just line art so far. This means that some detail might be a little different between the images, but overall they look like 2 photographs of this couple taken on the same day in the same outfit. I'm not sure if Rosie's bracelet is on the same wrist, but that can easily be explained as her fidgeting with her jewelry and taking it on and off. The patches on Lenore's pants might be a little differently placed too, since a lot of patches from the previous image were along the edges of the pants, where they'd be visible front and back. Other than those small details though, I think the images look consistent to each other. Since a lot of the details I'm drawing are details I've drawn before and talked about already, I'm going to instead talk about these 2 as characters. Given that Rosie has pointed ears and Lenore has wings, horns, and purple skin, it's pretty clear that these 2 are part of some fantasy world. However, their clothing is modern, and they are part of modern, or at least mostly modern, fashion subcultures. I have a lot of characters that I've drawn and OCs I've created who exist in a similar setting of fantasy but in a modern time period. It's some kind of urban fantasy world, but unlike a lot of urban fantasy stories, the magical element of the world isn't hidden. It could be an alternate Earth, or a completely different fantasy world that has developed technology in a similar timeline to Earth. Rosie and Lenore are young adults, however many years old it takes to be that in their fantasy races. They could be in university or just out of it. I think they've probably been dating for about a year now, after having been pining for each other as friends for ages beforehand, both afraid to make a move out of fear of ruining their friendship. They have very different interests, but enjoy sharing what they love with each other. Rosie has taught Lenore how to bake, and takes her girlfriend to all sorts of parks and meadows for picnics or to collect flowers. Lenore writes music for Rosie, and has gotten her into more alternative music, as well as taking her to small gigs and concerts. Both love art, fashion, and sewing in different ways, and will often spend an afternoon in each other's presence, working on separate projects. Rosie will do watercolor or scrapbooking, baking, sewing, or crochet, while Lenore writes music, makes patches and jewelry, or fills a sketchbook with ballpoint pen sketches. I think that when they were either flirting with each other as friends or in the early stages of dating, Rosie taught Lenore how to sew, after finding out that Lenore was using glue and safety pins to do all their punk clothing DIY. Both girls are still part of the very queer friendship group they formed in college, a group that involves all sorts of other fantasy races. They're probably the couple that is way too sappy with each other, and often, in good fun, their friends will loudly complain about it, or throw rappers at them when they should really get a room. The two are probably a bit too codependent. They just like being in each other's company so much that they do nearly everything together. Despite what it might look like, Lenore is really socially anxious, and Rosie is the one who, in restaurants, orders for both of them. In fact, in any social gathering that isn't just close friends that they are both comfortable with, Rosie finds herself doing most of the talking while Lenore just follows her around. Rosie will lightly tease Lenore about this, but still does the talking. To outsiders, this actually makes Lenore look rather intimidating. A very tall, silent demon just standing behind the short, bubbly girl. And Lenore is Rosie's scary dog privilege when walking at night. As I'm writing all the lore for these characters, I'm now thinking of even more drawings that I want to put the two of them in. I want to draw Rosie in Lenore's band t-shirts as pajama shirts. I want Lenore in Rosie's cozy knitted sweater because she insisted that she wouldn't get cold. I want to draw the two in the kitchen, Lenore sitting on the counter stealing food while Rosie cooks. I want to draw them stargazing, curling up together to watch a movie, Lenore playing guitar for Rosie while she draws. I don't have time to draw any of these ideas. This was meant to be a quick drawing based on 2 images, and now I have 2 more OCs who I've fallen in love with and nowhere to put them. I didn't even create a story with plot hooks or anything. Back to that point about this being a quick drawing. I checked when I was speeding up my footage, and between these 2 drawings, I spent 7.5 hours drawing. My regular drawings, involving just one character, usually take between 2 and 4 hours, depending on the level of detail. So had I just done a regular video, it would have taken half the time. However, given that I essentially drew 4 characters, well, 2 characters twice, I think 7.5 hours is actually pretty quick, and I had a lot of fun doing this. I'd love to hear any headcanons you have about these girls that you've developed. Please give me more reasons to obsess over them. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribe for more art. Hopefully the video in 2 weeks' time will actually be a simpler video to make, and I'll see you then. Until next time, bye!